Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first will be a focus on the economic situation of the country, especially with regards to the upcoming, of course, budget and the talks with the IMF. That, of course, point towards the future direction that the country and, of course, the government and the finance ministry is going to be taking forward with important decisions that need to be made and important budget allocations that we'll be seeing, especially the numbers that are going to be set for the next fiscal year, particularly in terms of issues such as tax collection and revenue generation. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of talks that we've already had with the IMF, and then, of course, the expected negotiations with the extended fund facility as well that Pakistan is aiming to seek with the IMF once again. So we're going to be taking a look at where we stand on that front today and what sort of a direction the government is going to be taking, and especially what that will mean in terms of its impact on the people, the middle class particularly, and the working class who seem to be the most affected by these decisions. So we're going to try and understand what the government's plan is and what a kind of economic future we are looking at. Next segment is going to be taking a look at the political situation of the country with a focus on PML-N and, of course, the election of the PML-N president, Nawaz Sharif, who has been elected unopposed as a president of the Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz, something that, of course, he had lost 6 years ago due to the Supreme Court's decision with regards to Panama Papers case, which, of course, later he was acquitted from. And so we're going to be taking a look at what this means, particularly in terms of the party's elections themselves, and then, of course, the impact that this will have on the party and the future running of the government and the politics in the country. So we're going to be taking a closer look at the dynamics within the party and, of course, the kind of change that this is going to bring about in terms of the political participation of Mia Mohammad Nawaz Sharif. That's going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online for our first segment regarding economy by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's a senior economist and a regular on our show. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan, for joining us and being a part of this discussion. And as we, of course, continue talking about the IMF with our guests, it's very important, of course, to take a look at what exactly is going to be the future outlook. So, Farrukh, I'm going to start with you with reference to where we stand today and how we see the way that these talks have continued with the IMF, setting the overall framework, perhaps, of which direction is going to take. What do you think has been or have been the most pressing factors that still, of course, there is uncertainty about?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think that whenever we are going to talk about our budget and whenever we are going to talk about our engagement with IMF, the biggest issue is, of course, going to be our ability to balance the books. Of course, every country and every economy, like individuals, has to actually focus on inflows and outflows, how much you are earning and how much you are spending. This has been the biggest problem for the country, that we have been actually consuming more, we have been spending more, and we haven't been able to generate revenues accordingly. And now what happens is that there are several bottlenecks that one has to talk about, particularly our fiscal deficit actually comes from the state's subsidies in various sectors like electricity, like in fuel. Repeatedly it has happened that the country was actually subsidizing these basic items as well, and that caused a lot of problem. For example, while we talk about circular debt in power sector, gas sector is something that has astoundingly grown in circular debt. So now what the government of Pakistan needs to do and has been trying to do for quite some time, especially since we actually came into SBA, that was just concluded, it was that we will try to actually go for fiscal belt tightening, increasing the revenues and actually doing away with as many subsidies as possible. But that has come at a cost. When you talk about the economic situation, inflation actually really was jolting the system, and it wasn't endemic, it wasn't internal to our economic system. It was coming from abroad as well, and then of course the floods that actually attacked the board for quite some time. Because of that, you had to actually keep the interest rate very high as well. And that actually caused us not to invest, the investor to actually go and start business initiatives. So now what we are looking at the budget at this moment is how the government proposes to balance all these factors, ensure that inflation goes down, but that also means that while inflation goes down, job creation does take place, that the government actually collects more revenues, especially doing away with waivers that were given to the rich and ensuring that the poor are not directly impacted by various shocks to the system. If that can happen, I am sure that we can take care of the budget as well, and then we will remain in the IMF program as well. Finally, FDI is very important because then you need economic growth as well. So the challenge then is whether you can ensure that you are actually bringing about the kind of reforms that were needed while ensuring that there is enough growth to take care of the masses.
Absolutely. And Faisal, I want your perspective also, particularly in terms of how difficult this is going to be for the government. Of course, this is a very important decision that they have to take, perhaps the first very important decision since coming to power earlier this year. And so I want to understand the kind of precarious situation that puts the government in terms of balancing the political mileage or political impact that certain tough measures is going to take on the party or the government. And then, of course, also the need to bring up the kind of measures that are required by the IMF, that are required to take the economy forward. And what sort of role will different institutions be able to play in this regard in terms of the synergy that needs to exist, particularly when we talk about the finance ministry, the SIFC, other bodies in the different provinces. What do you foresee in terms of the need to balance on all these fronts as well?
Yes, Sana, obviously when we talk about Pakistan's economy, all of the institutions that are involved in improving the economy, of course, they have to gel in and obviously support the system itself and move forward. But when we talk about the economy overall, of course, we know that the current government, I mean, when they took power back in 2022, since then, of course, they have been facing problems. Of course, political turmoil was one of the factors in it, and then economy was already in the shambles, and they had to, of course, take care of it. And then they made the decisions which on ground, on paper, they were very very harsh decisions, and but they were necessary decisions to be made, and to, of course, steer the economy towards the right path, and which was to, of course, sustain all of the pressures on the economy and move forward. But if we historically take the example of PML-N as the ruling party, as we know that it is the ruling alliance, and PML-N is kind of party that always favors the business class, favors the industrial class, creates jobs, and eases the pressures on these sectors. Reason being that they always try to provide them with adequate electricity, adequate energy, and so that the machinery can move on and people's jobs are created and the economy moves on. But this time around, there are certain decisions which are being made under the pressure by the government and the ruling PML-N party. Reason being that they want to, of course, steer the economy towards the right path, where after all of these pressures and negotiations with the IMF, of course, IMF factor is one of the pivotal factor in making the decisions right now. And even if we take the example of IMF demands regarding increasing the tariff on GST to 18%, that would, of course, add on towards the inflation as well, and it would be a decision that would have its own implications as well. And there are certain more decisions which are being made that would have a negative impact on the sort of life of people at large. But at the same time, this should be understood that the decisions which are being made, they are made under sort of this manzaria that eventually they want to steer the economy towards the right path, where they don't want the country to go towards a sort of a bankrupt, getting bankrupt or anything like that. They want to, of course, sustain all the pressures and improve the current situation. And we know that in recent times the situation has been improved. SIFC is of course working day and night to make sure that all of the resources of Pakistan, they are being utilized with the wisdom of sort of improving Pakistan's current state of affairs in terms of economy. And in coming days we will be seeing that all of the pressures, they would be sustained and our economy would be at a right track.
Right. Let us also welcome in the debate Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's joined us on telephone 9. Dr. Khaqan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well, Sana.
Great. Welcome to the debate, Dr. Khaqan. So, of course, we're talking about the IMF, the current economic situation, and, of course, particularly the budget. And I want your take first on the kind of news that have been coming in with regards to changes in tax exemptions that, of course, seem to point towards a direction that the government might have to take with regards to the IMF. And I want to understand your perspective on how this will impact the people of Pakistan, especially if we take a look at tax exemptions for the salaried and non-salaried class, and how perhaps equaling the two as personal income, what sort of impact do you expect that to have, and whether or not this is a direction that we should be taking?
So, Sana, in a sense, the task ahead of the authorities is quite clear. One, cement a program with the IMF so that the nascent macro stability can be cemented and ensured and deepened in a way. Number two, of course, is the budget. Present a budget to the nation, which kind of sets a reform path, which sets a path for fiscal consolidation, is acceptable to the fund, is acceptable to the people of Pakistan, and kind of sets the tone for the government to take their process of fiscal consolidation, export-led growth, in the next 3 years. And of course, after the budget, the task ahead is, can they do the structural work of the economy so that they can cement all, the program bit into more structural or fundamental tackling of the economy. So I think that's how in the coming months and years we'll, acknowledge the things that the government does, and at the same time kind of see where there are shortfalls. On the IMF front, I think the fund had done a lot of work on the tax side. And of course, now I'm able to say this because the mission has been there. So in 2021, they did a tax assessment for Pakistan. It's called TADAT. TADAT is a tool that the IMF uses, and they are able to figure out administrative, policy, regulatory, pitfalls in the system where there are gaps. So they had a fair idea of what was going on. Then in December 2023, very recently, we had a TA mission, which is a technical assistance mission. And again, the TA put up a report. The government hasn't gone in and made that report public. But my sense of the report is that the things that you just asked me, the sales tax changes, so there are 3 schedules, Schedule 5, Schedule 6, and Schedule 8. So they've kind of proposed changes in all, which means that, the exemptions go away on many sectors, including pharmaceuticals. Then the rate where there is concessional rate, that goes away. So, hiking across the board to about 18%. Then they talked about the personal income tax as well. In the personal income tax, they tend to talk about equalizing what the rate on the income tax on the individuals is to the general income tax on the corporates and the AOPs, etc., which will again mean that we would have to kind of hike the personal income tax that is levied on the individual. And then there are, a host of other ideas that they've brought to the table, including a GST on petroleum products, Again, a GST on petroleum products is not easy at this time, considering that there is already a PTL. So, so these are the things that now the authorities have to negotiate and kind of put up options which are maybe more tenable from our side and acceptable from the side of the IMF. So I think that's where the discussion took place. So, we have some concessions on the non-profit organization, charitable donations. So again, repealing some of the remaining exemptions for donations and non-profit organizations was also discussed. Capital gains tax, on the personal movable property. I think that's under discussion. I've already mentioned the personal income tax, but something else that comes to mind is that there is a chart about pensions being taxed after a certain extent, maybe 100,000 or so. These are some serious changes, Sana, considering the fact that we are in an inflation bout of 29% last year on the average, 26% this year on the average. And the next year, yes, the inflation is coming down, which means the rate of growth of prices is coming down, and the average is expected to be around 12.5 to 15%. But these 3 years in running have taken a toll on the buying power, the purchasing power of people. So I don't know. I think there is certainly a lot of discussion here that is needed. Sana, I've always maintained it's the team on the authority side which makes all the difference. It's the preparation on the authority side which makes all the difference. Funds also suggested that excise duty, again, on things like cigarettes, regardless if it's a local manufacturer or a foreign manufacturer, to be hiked. So all these things, there is some talk of small and medium enterprise taxation, and then generally the administrative work on the tax policy units, etc. Now, these are, of course, serious issues. Our current tax structure would take us somewhere to 9,200 billion rupees on the FPR. There is talk of 12.5 trillion rupees, which in my opinion would require at least 12 to 1400 billion rupees of new taxation in the areas I've suggested to you. My sense is that the government itself would find it tough to do all these things, and these things are tough in an environment where there is slugflation in the country, which means sluggish growth and, kind of inflationary bout that has continued all over the world. And in Pakistan, it's heightened and due to a number of factors, starting from the floods all the way to the petroleum prices are rupee adjusting. Now, how much can be negotiated with the fund? The time remains of the essence as well, because as we move into the budget somewhere around the 8th, all these things have to be incorporated in the budget. Again, my sense from my discussions out of Pakistan are that the fund wants all these things to be part of the budget, to be reflected in the budget, to be passed by the
Dr. Saab, that is very important, and I'm glad that you have actually spoken about the inflows and how to improve them, how to actually ensure that there's more revenue. But there's also the matter of spending, and there's a lot of wastage also. There are 3 categories where one could actually talk about. One, SOEs. We kept on talking about privatization of various low-hanging fruits, but we haven't seen much materializing there, from PIA to power distribution companies. The second one is reforming the PSDP. The wastage that goes through the PSDP, that has to be stopped. And the third one is the burden of loans. So we actually kept on talking about the need to reprofile certain foreign loans as well, so the country can have some balancing equation where most of the money is not going just to actually retire or balance debt. Do you think that there is a possibility on these 3 important aspects as well?
So actually, you've hit the nail on the head. All the talk from the fund side as well as in Pakistan is focused on the taxation side. I think the bigger and important topic that has risen across over the last few years has been what is the work that we can do on the expenditure side. All these things are extremely important. How do we revamp the PSDP? What do we do on the pensions? What do we do on the guarantees that we give to SOEs, the direct equity injection we do in SOEs, and also the debt that we get them and we support to get them. So, I mean, expenditure reform is probably more important right now for Pakistan because the taxation takes precedence. So we put this behind, and then of course, the subjects that are with the federal government, they have to be devolved because you have to look at 18th Amendment and 7th NFC in entirety. And when you do, you can see that there are poverty, zakat, ushr, etc., education, which are still being handled by the federal government, both on the current side as well as on the PSDP side, and then the HEC expenditure, which have to be taken down to the provinces because we have already devolved a lot of funding to the provinces. And then itself, the bigger task is that, are you going to carry the federal government size of 43 divisions, so many attached departments and such huge HR, or are you going to really start thinking about all these issues, which are, of course, serious issues? And then Pakistan's success story of DISP across the board, PPP set it, PML-N followed through with it, and even during the last fund program, we pushed to increase it. Can we increase it substantively? Can we take the electricity tariff subsidies, the cost of sharing of these poverty expenditures all in to the income support program and pass some of the poverty spending onto the provinces? This is the serious work that needs to be done. Actually, Pitafi Saab, I would judge the budget on this topic that we've just talked about, and then the budget management itself. There are these things called the TSA account that we had to fully functionalize. We've moved somewhere on it, but not in a lot of depth. And then the tax expenditures that we are doing. How do we handle that? And then the PSDP reform, of course, that if we have 1,500 projects or so, and they have a throw forward of more than a decade, do we need to keep adding projects, or do we eliminate some of the projects on which the funding hasn't gone through and try and complete the infrastructure or the other works quickly on the projects that are already 50-60% spent and divert monies to them? Because every year we cut our PSDP. We start with 950 and end up with 600 billion. This has reduced the quality of our spending, the quantity of our spending. So these are the serious issues. Can we put all these expenditure reforms together will define the quality of the budget. And I think you have very rightly prompted me to talk about this.
Right. Dr. Khaqan, I have a few more questions with regards to tax collections as well, particularly in terms of what we've been hearing of any possible change with regards to import duties, and also in terms of putting another tax on importing raw materials, which was earlier revoked. But I want to understand how you think that is going to impact any or possible development that could potentially exist regarding exporting and of course manufacturing within the country as well. And then add to that the impact that we have seen previously in terms of getting retailers and wholesalers. You've of course also talked about this previously as well, but again we've seen that even this time around we haven't really been successful in on that front. So do you think that there could be any possible way of moving forward with this step and getting more people under the tax net?
And Dr. Saab, because we are talking about GST also, every time we hear that there's demand for cranking it up 1% or 2%, the question is whether we can also give GST a VAT format so that we at least have the kind of documentation that was needed. Is that possible, sir?
So, on the three things, on the design of the Tajir Dost, I mean, I've had some apprehensions in the sense that the first month didn't do too well. Second month, We have about 15,000 Tajers who have registered. Look at the total number, 3.2 million, and we have about 3 million of commercial connections. So a registration of 14,000 really doesn't mean much. But still, it's better than where we were. I think the design, the carrot and stick, and then our ability to go after the people who don't register, the penalties, the kind of what we call digital work that we can do to connect the dots, the data mining that we can do would make a lot of difference. On the other hand, of course, talking to the associations, but not in a weak position. I'm sorry, we've done this too many times. The last PDM government took a step. Go back, and I've been on many tables where we took a step and then we pushed back. I think the time has really come. I mean, these people have to themselves consider part of the citizenry and pay tax as you and I pay tax on the wage which comes to us after deduction. So the principle here is whether it's a Tajir, an agri income, a wage income, a corporate income, everyone earning an income has to pay up his or her share of what the state has through its legislative work deemed fit. And that's, I think, it. I think we should go after them with a wholehearted attempt this time. And, million was a target in our mind, and million should remain to be a target in our mind, irrespective of IMF. That's something that we have to do. On the import side, so now a lot of people will tell you the story that we have an import problem. Actually, our imports are about 22% of our GDP. These are on the higher side, but these are not, so exaggerated to get us into an issue. The problem really comes that our exports are only 9% of GDP and have stuck to being 9% of GDP. On the other hand, our customer, our consumer has become much more oriented to buying phones, mobiles, computers, all kinds of imported stuff, whereas our exporter has become more local, because you see more local outlets of even textile in the city, because as the middle class has started buying, the incentive to export has dropped. So one has to be very clear where we have to remove export duties to ensure raw material in the country. It is going to be the export drive which is going to balance our trade, not cutting imports, and especially when we are in an IMF program, cutting the imports would become very, very difficult for us. We would have to be opening the imports as we move into a proper program. And in generic terms, we would have to do that as well, because if we don't allow the imports in our country, our exports would be hurt in terms of the raw materials, in terms of the machinery parts that are needed, and so on and so forth. So this Ministry of Commerce has to take very seriously. We have done strategic trade policy frameworks, and I've sat through so many of them, but they have not worked. So they have to go back to the drawing board and see where are the fault lines, where our industry is unable to compete internationally, where we have protected our car industry. That's one example where we have protected other industries, and our competitive behavior remains lower. And the deregulation of the whole economy. I've just last Sunday written a very detailed paper on deregulating Pakistan's economy in the newspaper, The News. It's called Unshackling the Pakistan Economy, and I kind of show how a competition framework, how a deregulation framework, how a liberalization framework has worked in Australia, which was very, very similar to Pakistan in the 1970s, where we stand today. Australia stood there, and how they managed to take the economy to a very, very different level by deregulating the economy, privatizing, liberalizing, removing controls on price settings and agriculture. They were exactly doing the things that we are doing. So I urge you guys and the policymakers to have a read how they removed controls on the foreign capitals, how they decentralized industrial relationship, how they pushed actually a national competition policy, and how did they corporatize the state-owned enterprises. The aim was to create a more flexible economy. Pakistan has, the same kind of aim. It's the same kind of position where Australia stood. So that's going to be extremely important in terms of the exports.
Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Khaqan, I'm glad that you have highlighted this, that of course our exports are shrinking and we need to, of course, enhance them. We know there are certain sectors that have already, always been performing really well in terms of exporting goods. Sports is one of them, and of course, there are certain others that are, doing very well. But when it comes to, with time improving our products, we lack that. I don't know why we do it, but we do lack that, because very recently I was going through a few of the items related to fans. I mean, these pedestal fans or wall fans or whatever. With time, of course, world has, with the global warming and, climate change factor, even the European countries are buying all of these equipments to, of course, have their homes with the proper air and all of that. What I wanted to ask is, I was told that with time, Pakistan had to, of course, improve the quality of its
value addition.
Of its items, which they have lacked, and the proper research isn't being done. If we talk about the European countries, they are in favor of soundless fans, and the fans which are sort of, very light in the weight, and we are not providing them with these kind of items. Do we need to, of course, recheck our manuals, how we are, lingering on all of these industries? And do we need to, of course, put extra efforts in research and development so that whatever the world needs, we start producing it now to increase the sort of, our export volume? Is this the case that we need to, of course, put focus on, sir?
Faisal actually spoke about fans that don't make noise and are light. Who wouldn't want that kind of fans? But Dr. Saab, I'm still waiting.
Many other things.
I'm still waiting for the answer to the VAT format.
Yes. So very quickly on Faisal and then back to GS. So Faisal, you've spoken from my heart, not your heart. The reason is that, I do a lot of thinking work. So I need a really, really quiet room. My wife's the same. She's got a PhD in taxation. She works internationally, and we both need very quiet rooms. So when we are buying a fan abroad or in Pakistan, our emphasis is on the fact that it has to be, the quietest fan, so that when it works, it doesn't make a noise. I have not found a quiet fan in Pakistan, and I've done this serious work. So every time I have to go abroad, buy a fan and bring it back. And this has been something that I've consistently done. So all the fans in my house used to be Royal, Park, GFC, all the ones that I have had to discard them. I can't work. So we are not aligned. We are not attuned to the kind of the world that is becoming. Faisal, you could not have put it better. So there are two fans in my room, one in my study, one in my bedroom. They're both very expensive fans that I have to buy from abroad, whether I'm in Pakistan or in Paris. And they make, zero noise. As soon as I put on these, whether it's the Lure fan or the other fans, the Pakistani ones, it makes such a huge noise that I have to actually go and close them. So this kind of shows that in terms of the technological task that Pakistan had to do to upgrade itself to be able to sell its stuff abroad, especially being attuned to the West and the European sense quality, we've not been able to gear ourselves. So you couldn't have put it there. We need a lot of R&D. Here there's government task. The government could have opened R&D centers in the agriculture sector to improve agriculture productivity. We did. Still, our agriculture productivity is, in the 5 staple crops, somewhere between 30 to 50% of the world's best. And the fans are another example. Same way the surgical, we used to lead, but now it's so technical, so highly technical that we've not been able to upgrade. So we are still at the lower end of our exports, whether it's rice, $3 billion, whether it's textiles or leathers. And even on the leather, I jokingly say this, that, I was listening to the Christian Dior CEO, she's a lady, her interview the other day, and how she explained how that brand was created. I mean, why couldn't we have a brand called, Park Leather, having the finest leather jackets in the world? But this is, instead of selling a leather jacket for $110, selling a leather jacket for, $1,000, the high-end quality. So, of course, we've missed this whole ball game. Now, a lot of, the councils, the PBC and the OICCI, they have to do this work. They have to do this, tank work. They have to do this R&D investment as well. So you could not have put it better. This is a topic for a real webinar, how to take Pakistan from where we are in terms of quality in a particular area to the next level. On the GST, so you've probably, been familiar with the IMF talks. Transforming the GST into a modern VAT has been, Pitafi Saab, something that the fund has been saying to us for a long time. GST on services is now with the provinces, so a lot of reconciliation is required to get this GST turned into a modern VAT, which gives refunds very quickly, which was the whole idea. Again, these are the crucial areas that we've not been able to turn around. Can we do it in the budget? I don't think so. Can we do it in the 3-year IMF program? I think it's going to be one of the key issues that they are going to raise, because in the technical assistance report, I think that has just come to Pakistan on the longer term after FY26, the work that they want us to do, which means in the 3rd year of a fund program, is to transform the GST to a modern VA.
Right. Thank you very much,
Thank you
Dr.
very
Khaqan Najeeb, for joining us and being part of the discussion. It's a pleasure as always. We're now going to be taking a look at the political situation of the country with, of course, Mr. Nawaz Sharif being elected unopposed as the president of the PML-N. And Faisal, I'll take your perspective on this first with reference to, of course, what we have seen and the kind of evolution and developments that we have covered since the past 6 years is, of course, something very interesting to look at in terms of the party dynamics themselves, and then of course where it brings the leader, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, to where he is today. And so I want your perspective on how you view the past 6 years and the current role, of course, of the PML-N president now in the current political and economic dynamics of the country, and what sort of an impact would you think that will have both on party dynamics and politics of the country?
Yeah, of course, obviously, Sana, if we look at the party itself, I mean, for 6 years, we didn't see, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz being led by Nawaz on the papers. But of course, everyone knew that the calling the shot is a business which is entirely in the hands of, former Prime Minister Mia Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, and he has been doing it, throughout. And of course, we know that the presidentship now, after 6 years, it means a lot, and we know that at that time when he left the country, when he left the presidentship of PML-N, at that time, of course, we know that the situations of economy, situations of the country were very different. Pakistan was, of course, going in a fast pace in terms of economy. It was, fighting against the terrorism. We were in a war against terrorism at that time, and we know that lots of things were happening at that time. And then later on, of course, there was a phase where PML-N was not in the power, but during that time, that was the struggle time, and in that struggle time, of course, Mia Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, while sitting outside of the country, he has been struggling for the party itself, and he was leading from London at that time, and we know he led the party throughout. And now, of course, he coming back into the presidential form within the party, it means a lot, because there are challenges which are being faced by Pakistan at this hour. And of course, with the kind of experience he has, he's 3-time Prime Minister of Pakistan. Twice he was Prime Minister of Pakistan when he had a 2/3 majority in the country, and he was empowered with the most of the seats in throughout Pakistan. So he's a political figure within Pakistan's political spectrum, who is most prominent in terms of ruling this country, and in terms of decision making. Very important decisions he made in past as well. He has highlighted few of them in today's speech as well. One of them is, of course, related to Pakistan becoming atomic power, and obviously it was today. And 28th of May is being celebrated by Pakistan, and of course the decision of testing our nuclear capability was made by himself. And there are many more decisions which are made by Mian Mohammad Nawaz Sharif at the juncture where Pakistan had to do it, and he did it for Pakistan. So this time around, he is of course facing another challenge, and that is the economic challenge. And we shouldn't be forgetting that the government is being powered. The power hub of the government is PML-N, and the PML-N president is Mian Mohammad Nawaz Sharif. And now and before as well, he has been advising the Prime Minister, and furthermore in coming days we will see that he will be further advising as well. So he is someone who is the decision making sort of transformer within within and this is where the decisions would be coming out from. So to me, I think it's an excellent decision, because he becoming president, it sort of gives more value to the government, because the ruling party is being led by him, and he's the one who's behind all of the decisions, and he's someone who has the most sort of experience in Pakistan right now when it comes to ruling the country.
Right, and Farrukh, I want your perspective on this too, with reference to, of course, Mr. Nawaz Sharif's future in politics in the country. In what sort of political sphere will he be part of? Not, of course, just limited to being the party president, but of course, general politics in the country, and also in terms of the party elections themselves, and how democratic they were, or how properly they were conducted, and what this means in terms of the way that we have seen previous party elections as well, and politics in the country, and the need for a more democratic way of things.
All right. Thank you very much, Sana, for this question. While Faisal was talking at that time, I was actually revisiting various important memory nodal points, right? For example, the day when Mian Nawaz Sharif was sent behind the bars, and we thought that he is going to stay there for very long, and then his health issue was there as well. So he is a man who has actually repeatedly come back as a phoenix, risen from the ashes repeatedly. So today his coming back to his party's leadership is something that you can call something natural coming in its place, right? Because his party is called Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. It is not called anything else, right? So while you banned him, he still was in the name, and the party and its workers still actually answer to his voice rather than anybody else. Of course, there are visionaries, many visionaries in the party. The current Prime Minister is one such person, but even then, the people who vote for PML and primarily speak to or answer to the calls from Mian Nawaz Sharif. Now, the question that you asked regarding electoral politics within the party, the fact that Mian Nawaz Sharif was unopposed elected to the party's leadership is actually something that reflects on what kind of democracy we are. And we have been complaining about the idea of parties not having democracy. It doesn't stop with number one, Sanam. There has to be a number two, number three, number four, number five, and of course, then the party kind of spreads out. So the moment I see more elected people getting other posts, I am going to be happier, right? The concern is that we keep on trying to fight the idea of cult of personality with the more of the same. What happened when PML-N had to be actually shown its place? Another party emerged, that was PTI, and again cult of personality. Now the problem is that till the time people are made aware of their rights and their interest, and they actually form a group or political party that is not centralized, but which is actually growing from the grassroots. Till that time, you are going to have cult of personality and you have to make do with it. Now here's another thing. Regarding Nawaz Sharif, even when I was critiquing him, I used to tell you that the person, because I've interacted with him, has a vision. And it is a good vision of a regional connectivity, trading with your neighbors as well. The only problem arises when people don't understand what that means. Because in order to actually expand and connect with the region, you have to break walls. And if you try to break walls which are there, especially in their system, somebody thinks that you're going against the vision. That is not so. The only problem is how to harmonize Pakistan's polity with that vision. That said, my last concern is that he is in his 70s. And we keep on talking about, future. So future has to be Gen X, it has to be Gen Z, it has to be even Gen Y also, but why should I forget your generation? So all these people have to actually take leadership.
Right.
And there has to be a transition. That means that Nawaz Sharif remains at the head of the party, but of course then it can actually give way to more buoyant and young, youthful faces that can offer some kind of change to the country.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.